Well, good afternoon. My name is Alice Williams, and I'm your host this afternoon. And I'd like to welcome you to the Virginia MBDA Business Center webinars. This is where we host our webinars every month. And this month, we're featuring DLA, Defense Logistics Agency. We're very happy to have them here today. I want to begin by going over a few administrative things. And the first thing I'd like to announce is that our leader, Mr. Tommy Marks, unfortunately could not be with us today. He is normally the host for these events. The Minority Business Development Agency is operated by the council, which is a Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council. Please forgive me, which is a CRMSDC. Where Ms. Sharon Pender is served as the president and Tommy served as the vice president. Tommy also served as the director of the Business Center for MBDA. So before we begin, I'd like to go over a few administrative things that I need you all to know. If you're interested in asking questions, we highly encourage you to also put those in the question box, Q&A box. We will get those at the end of our presentation. If we can't get to any of your questions, we will be posting them or hanging them on our website at the end of the day or no later than tomorrow for you to review. Our presentation also, this is being recorded, so our presentation will also be hung on our website after tomorrow or sometime later today. Again, my name is Alice Williams. I serve as the senior consultant for Minority Business Development Agency Business Center, and I'm happy to be your host. We have a very distinguished guest today, and I'm very excited to have him. He's definitely no stranger to the small business community. I've known him for a very long time when I worked in the federal government myself, but we're very happy to have Mr. Chris Hall. And before I bring him on, I just want to give a brief overview of his bio. As Tommy will always say, we won't eulogize him. We definitely like to tell you a little bit about Chris. Chris Hall serves as the Deputy Director, Office of Small Business Program for the Defense Logistics Agency. Serving as the Deputy since 2016, Mr. Hall supports DLA's leadership on small business matters and work to increase small business participation in DLA's acquisition. In this role, he promotes small business utilization to strengthen the industrial base that fulfills DLA's mission as the nation's combat logistics support agency. Mr. Hall is a firm believer in the importance of building strong partnerships with small businesses, which reduces risk in the supply chain and is essential to DLA's ability to provide resilient and secure support to the warfighter. We're so happy to have him here. Mr. Chris Hall, can you come on, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, Alice.
Good afternoon, Chris. We are so happy to have you. Thank you so much. We know Dwight, the director, had other responsibilities to take care of, more important than this today. But we're definitely very happy to have you here and looking forward to going through the series of Defense Logistics Agency business and how to do business with DLA. Chris, can you just give us a quick overview of DLA?
Sure thing. So as Alice said, and Alice, by the way, thank you to the Virginia MBDA Business Center, Tommy Marks and yourself for inviting DLA to participate in the event. Industry engagement is a major initiative at DLA, so we appreciate the opportunity to interact with our industry partners at events like this one. So a little bit about DLA. So DLA is the Department of Defense's Logistics Combat Support Agency, providing worldwide logistics support to the military services, as well as several civilian agencies in foreign countries. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but this slide is taken from the DLA strategic plan, which you can find on our website. If you're serious about pursuing DLA as a customer, you should take the time to learn more about us, and the strategic plan is a good place to start. So our plan is our strategy to meet the evolving requirements of the warfighter and the nation with a targeted approach encompassing our highest priorities. Your understanding DLA's perspective on these key strategic elements, including our mission and vision, will go a long way towards laying the groundwork for long-term mutually beneficial partnership with DLA. So a little bit about our strategic plan. The plan includes 5 lines of effort that you see on the screen, and the first 4 are most pertinent to you as a supplier. So warfighter always. So warfighter always means support to the warfighter is our #1 priority. Support the nation. This speaks to how we support agencies outside of the Department of Defense. Trusted mission partner addresses how we need to understand our customers and help solve their problems. And let me explain that a little bit more. So customer, what do we mean by customer? When we at DLA talk about our customers, we mean the military services and other agencies we support, such as the Department of Homeland Security. So to give you a little more sense of where DLA fits, so we're part of the Department of Defense. We're part of the so-called 4th estate. So we're not Army, Navy, Air Force. Of course, we're one of the other defense agencies, the biggest actually defense agency outside of the Army, Navy, Air Force, at least in terms of contracts. We write about $45 billion worth of contracts every year, and we'll get more into that in a bit. But back to the strategic plan. Modernize acquisition and supply chain management. So this line of effort addresses DLA's commitment to work closely with our industry partners to modernize and streamline our acquisition processes to build stronger supply chains. So again, I want to save time for what we're going to get into, but our strategic plan is on our website, dla.mil, and I encourage you to go there and read more. So back to you, Alice.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. That's excellent. You made a very good point in talking about strategic plan. Often we find our MBEs or just businesses in general interested in doing business with an organization, and they really don't understand the mission or what it is that they do and priorities. And these are the things that you will find in every strategic plan. You will understand the leadership's vision for the organization. You understand what their priorities are and so forth. So that's very good that your strategic plan is out there on the website for those to be able to retrieve it and understand how to do business with DLA. I have another question. I want to go on to my first question. In layman's term, can you tell more about DLA in this organization and what you buy?
Sure thing. And we can jump to the next slide for that. And before I get into that, just to piggyback on what you said, Alice, right? So understanding the agency, right? So we work in the small business. I work in the small business office at DLA. There's about 45 other folks that staff the small business office at DLA. So we get, right, every day we have, incoming email, a lot of cold calls from small businesses, describing their capabilities, which is fine. But my recommendation, kind of alluded to it on the previous slide, is learn more about the agency first. Our requirements and other agencies' requirements aren't secret, right? They're on, well, most of them aren't secret. They're on sam.gov, right? That's where you go to learn about opportunities out there, whether it's DLA or any other federal agency. We all follow the rules to post publicly our requirements, our opportunities for contracts. So rather than cold calling agencies, look at our solicitations, look at our contracts. You can do that kind of research in FPDS, Federal Procurement Data System, or at sam.gov to see what we bought in the future. And that's going to give you a pretty good sense of what we're going to buy, next year. So I just wanted to get that get that in, Alice, because that piggybacks, like I said, on what you said. It's important to learn about agencies. And it's hard to sell, right, with a cold call to an agency and say, you're coming to DLA to provide a particular capability, right? And maybe we don't, that may or may not be within our wheelhouse, and our wheelhouse is pretty well established, right? You're not often going to sell something. It's not usual that the government's going to buy something that they hadn't planned to buy. I mean, you might come with a new capability. It might sound really great, but we have our requirements fairly well in hand. So that's maybe a better approach to selling and approaching agencies, is to look at our solicitations, look at our requirements. And put your work towards putting together a quality proposal, et cetera, rather than cold calls. But that's kind of off topic. But back to the chart, Alice. So I usually tell folks, if your business makes, manufactures, or produces something, there's a fairly good chance DLA is a prospective customer. And this is true regardless of whether you are a small or large business. And I tend to think we have mostly small businesses on the line, but either way, right? To put our mission that you saw on the previous slide in simpler terms, so DLA sources and provides nearly 100% of the consumable items that our military forces need to operate. At DLA, we write about 10,000 contracts every day. That's about 3.5 million contracts every year. So as an example of our requirements of the things we buy, we supply the Army, Navy, Air Force with everything from food, fuel, energy, uniforms, medical supplies, construction material, and equipment. We also supply most of the repair parts for all of DoD's trucks, ships, and aircraft. The DLA supplies about 90% of the military's spare parts, nearly 100% of the fuel, and we manage the reutilization of military equipment. So we're headquartered at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, but DLA is a global enterprise. Wherever the warfighter has a significant military presence, DLA is there to support. DLA coordinates this effort, but we rely on our industry partners to produce virtually everything that we subsequently push out to the military services. So in other words, we acquire items from manufacturers and suppliers that we then provide to DoD or our other federal customers, often with supplementary services such as warehousing and packaging. DLA also writes contracts for items that are delivered directly to our suppliers or by our suppliers to DLA customers. For example, food and fuel for direct delivery to military installations. So our primary customers are the military services. However, we have a whole of government strategy, which expands our customer base beyond just the Department of Defense. DLA supports agencies outside of the Department of Defense, such as the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, and the Department of Agriculture. So we manage the supply of over 5 million items that we segmented into 8 supply chains managed by 6 more major subordinate commands, or MSCs. So on the top right side of the chart, you see the 8 supply chains, right? Medical, subsistence, clothing and textiles, energy, construction and equipment, aviation, land, and maritime. And you see the $48 billion on the chart. So DLA writes contracts for each of these supply chains. I just want to take another look at it before I say it. Right. In each of these supply chains, DLA writes contracts worth several $billion annually. For example, fuel. We buy $6 to $8 billion worth of fuel, jet fuel, and other types of energy for the department. On the left side of the screen, you see our major subordinate commands. The last thing on this chart I wanted to mention is the pie chart on the lower right. So correct statement that I'm partial to small businesses, but DLA has about 9,000 suppliers and 80% of them are small businesses. The pie chart is showing about $16 billion in small business contracts for FY 2022. So that's the year that ended last September. The takeaway is that DLA presents a ton of opportunities in a wide array of industries. Small businesses generally receive about 40% of DLA contract dollars, so that also leaves plenty of space for the big guys as well. The pie chart shows small business dollars with our supply chains and other buying commands, and I think I'll have a chance to get into those in a little more detail in the subsequent slides. And with that, back to you, Alice.
Thank you so much. Very interesting chart. Very exciting to see this. And for those, these are the 6 major subordinate commands. He gave you a quick overview of how they're structured and who they support and actually what they buy. So maybe if you're in the IT business, DLA is not for you. However, these are the major things that they buy. Maybe they do buy some small, and Chris can talk a little bit about that in terms of IT, but just know where you fit in as a company when doing business with DLA. Chris, I have another question. What are the top small business priorities? And can you talk a little bit about your small business socioeconomic program?
Sure thing. Right. So you mentioned some of it when you read my bio. I think some of the same material was in there, but small businesses represent a critical component of the DLA industrial base, which reduces risk in our supply chains and are essential to our ability to provide resilient and secure support to the warfighter. Meanwhile, the United States is facing unprecedented national security and economic challenges. For example, strategic competitors seek to displace the U.S. military as the world's preeminent force. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed fragility in critical supply chains, and consolidation within the defense market undermines the competition and innovation needed to support the warfighter. In an October 2021 memo, the Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin wrote that increasing opportunities for small businesses is one of my key priorities. The Office of Management and Budget, which establishes priorities for executive branch agencies, has issued several memos, a series of memos on small businesses or on small business priorities. So among other things, OMB increased the government-wide goal for contracts with small disadvantaged business from 5% in fiscal year 2021 to 12%. this year. So that's a doubling of the goal for small disadvantaged business, going to 14% by fiscal year 2025. The most recent guidance from OMB also asked agencies to increase attention on recruiting new entrants to support our supply chains. So that's part of the reason why I'm here speaking to you today. That is to recruit prospective suppliers to build diversity and resilience in our supply chains. So those are our priorities, right? The priorities of the DoD, the priorities of the administration, to build back small business participation in government contracts. If you follow the news and the various studies and documents that have come out of the department, you've seen, the steadily somewhat declining trend in small business participation in government contracts. It speaks to the last decade where that has decreased significantly, right? So in the small business office at DLA, that's our priorities, to build that back. Wanted to get in on this chart also. Alice, you mentioned the small business socioeconomic programs.
Yes.
And this chart is showing those 4 programs, and I'll touch on each briefly. So small business set-asides and set-asides for the small business socioeconomic programs are one of the ways DLA and other federal agencies provide a preference for small businesses competing for our contracts. Annually, DLA reserves hundreds of contracts in each of these categories. So small disadvantaged businesses, I mentioned that has gotten a lot of attention from OMB lately. So the name might not necessarily be clear what that means. So for your attendees, small disadvantaged businesses are owned and controlled by persons that are socially and economically disadvantaged as defined by the Small Business Administration, or SBA. So per SBA definitions, that generally means minority-owned small businesses. So when we say SDBs, again, we mean socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and SBA gets into a ton of further details on that, but generally speaking, that means minority-owned small businesses. The next socioeconomic program on the slide, women-owned small businesses. So women-owned small businesses must be owned and controlled, at least 51% owned and controlled by women who are U.S. citizens. And notice that SBA uses the term controlled in most of their other definitions of the various types of small businesses. So owned and controlled by women, in this case, women who are U.S. citizens. So controlled, as defined by SBA, means, in this case, women manage the day-to-day operations and make long-term decisions for the company. So similarly, the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Program is for small businesses owned and controlled by one or more service disabled veterans. The Hub Zone program, or the Historically Underutilized Business Zone program, is arguably the most challenging for agencies. In fact, the government has not met the 3% Hub Zone goal since the program was established in 1997. The Hub Zone program is for businesses in disadvantaged communities, which are designated by SBA and determined by things such as income levels and unemployment rates. In addition to set-asides, Hub Zone small businesses receive a 10% price evaluation preference when they're competing for unrestricted contracts. So we could spend an hour or longer on each of these programs, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate that. Look, I want to go off script just a little bit, and I'll jump right back on script. But you talked about the different socioeconomic programs, and you quickly mentioned that the Hub Zone program, you've never met your goals. I don't know if you're prepared to talk about this, but can you just give a brief overview of whether you're meeting, what goals are you meeting, what goals are you not meeting, and some of the programs you have in place to assist you in meeting those goals?
Sure thing. Yeah. So Hub Zone. So I mentioned, I guess there's good and bad news there. So the government has a 3% Hub Zone goal. DLA, the ways I could go into this for a while too, but the way the goals are established within the government, right? So SBA, the Small Business Administration, sets goals for the department, and then the Department of Defense sets goals for DLA and other agencies. And Alice, I know you know this.
Yes.
The federal government has never met the Hub Zone goal. DLA has actually met the Hub Zone goal now 2 years running.
Oh, great. Congratulations on that. That's a big deal.
Right, sure thing. And on track to meet it again for FY 2023. Historically, though, I mean, Hub Zone program for the department and DLA generally The Women-Owned Small Business Program and the Hub Zone program are the two that we struggle with the most. Currently at DLA, though slightly different, we are meeting the SDB goal. So again, the government-wide goal has increased substantially for
Yes.
SDBs.
Yes.
DLA's goal is lower than the government-wide goal. DLA's goal is 7.25%. And I think I'll get into some of our requirements and why it's necessary for the department to look differently at different agencies. But we're currently meeting our SDB goal. We're currently meeting our Hub Zone goal. And the two goals we're not meeting at DLA is the Women-Owned Small Business goal and the Service Disabled Veteran Owned Small Business goal. So those, if we need help, we need help in all of them. To be completely honest.
Of course.
We're doing pretty well in Hub Zone, and we have been, but we need help in all of them. And really the way DLA is getting after stuff like that is, like I said, doing events like this for the Minority Business Development Agency. If I said that the right way, in the right order, I mean, and set asides, right? That's our real opportunity to get after these goals, making set asides for small business and for the socioeconomic programs. And it gets complicated though. It's not that easy, right?
I understand. Yeah.
And as vendors, your folks should know it's not that easy, right? Certainly, there's lots of rules that go along with making a set aside, right? You make a set aside for the socioeconomic programs. For example, the prime contractor then has to follow certain rules like the non-manufacturer rule, limitations on subcontracting. So some of those set asides come with certain strings attached. And we don't have time to get into all that now.
Yeah, you're making a very valid point. Thank you so much for that. I know I got you off a little off track, but I thought that was very important to really understand where you're meeting your goals and some of the challenge that you're facing in terms of meeting your goal. And absolutely, it's what he's saying is that, it also goes back with preparation and understanding the organization and what they buy, and really going after strategically some of these goals where they're deficient at. And we really appreciate you running that down. I have another question. Do you have any, can you walk us through your DLA's buying commands? I think that's very important so they have a clear understanding of where these organizations are and what they really do.
Yeah, sure thing, Alice. And that's usually what I spend most of my time when doing events like this one is, help you under what really matters to you, right? As vendors is, are we a potential customer for you? What do we buy? How do we buy it? Are you a prospective supplier, or should you look at different agencies, right? So Alice mentioned the services versus supplies. I think you mentioned IT, and I'll get into in one of the commands. We do buy stuff like that, but like you said, most of what we buy is parts, supplies. The department, DoD, buys about 50% supplies, 50% services, and same goes for the Army, Navy, Air Force. Roughly speaking, DLA buys about 95% supplies. So we exist, right, to procure and supply the DoD with the supplies they need. So troop support, for example, construction and equipment supply chain. Everything you can kind of imagine a soldier carry outside of firearms and weapons. Everything that a soldier needs, carries around with them, requires to do their job. It's not just construction and equipment. I guess it's all these supply chains, right? The boots that a soldier wears, the uniforms, the medical supplies for DoD's hospitals, subsistence supply chain, all the food that goes through, the bases and dining halls, everything a soldier needs, generally speaking, all the supplies a soldier needs is what DLA provides via the troop support or DLA troop support. So DLA Troop Support Philadelphia, they're our biggest major subordinate command, managed, as you see on the screen, 4 of our 8 supply chains. About half of that $48 billion that we spend every year is DLA troop support, right? A lot goes through medical and a lot goes through construction and equipment. So construction and equipment supply chain, it's really, we've put that into one construction equipment, but it's really not. It's construction. We don't buy construction. DLA. There's other DoD components like the Army Corps of Engineers that do that, but we buy construction material. So anything you can imagine that Army Corps of Engineers needs to build a building, like cement and HVAC equipment and lighting, electrical components. DLA buys that, but we don't do the construction. Equipment, all the equipment, tactical gear, scuba gear, body armor, stuff like that, is what's bought in the equipment half of the construction and equipment supply chain. And I think that, I believe, covers troop support fairly well. If you want to go to the next chart, which I think is DLA Aviation. So Aviation, their primary mission is to procure repair parts for DoD aircraft. So these weapon systems include all the planes and helicopters owned by DoD components, such as the Air Force and the Navy. So examples of what Aviation buys: engine components, airframe, structural components, flight safety equipment, electrical components, lighting, bearings, cables. As you can imagine, the weapon systems, the C-130, for example, the F-35, each of these aircraft require thousands of parts, and DLA provides most of that via the DLA Aviation Major Subordinate Command. We can jump to the next, which is DLA Land and Maritime. So DLA Land and Maritime manages about 2 million items and supports nearly 1,800 weapon systems. So at DLA, we don't buy the truck, ship, or airplane, but rather all the parts, sustain, maintain, and repair the system over its life, which often lasts decades. So the land supply chain, think of all the land vehicles, tanks, trucks that the department owns. Things we buy for land vehicle operations include things like maintenance kits, transmission, engine, suspension components, wheels, tires. The maritime supply chain buys repair parts for all of our ships, things like electrical parts, valves, pumps, and motors. And we can jump to the next chart. So DLA Energy, and I made a comment about energy earlier, but they provide energy products to the military services and other federal agencies. As you can imagine, the Air Force uses quite a bit of jet fuel. So DLA Land and Maritime buys things like jet fuel, aviation and automotive gasoline, heating oil, lubricants. DLA Energy supports commodities and services, including missile and rocket fuels, coal, natural gas, electricity, renewable energy, and energy savings performance contracts. So that's DLA Energy. And they're actually the only command that's along with DLA headquarters at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Next chart, distribution. So that wraps up DLA supply chains. While supply chains buy material, DLA Distribution's major mission is to support the Department of Defense by receiving, storing, and issuing material stored at our warehouses. Most of the supplies for these operations are commercially available items such as packing material, boxes, pallets, conveyor systems, and other services support the DoD distribution network. So lots of vendors are surprised that the DLA mission generally does not involve trucking and shipping. The U.S. Transportation Command is the DoD component for those types of requirements. So when it comes to trucking, shipping, moving stuff around, if it's not part of our contract, for the prime contractor to deliver that to the base or wherever else it's needed, we partner with U.S. Transportation Command, which is the command to reach out to, or the agency to reach out to, if you have capabilities like trucking and shipping. So last major subordinate command on the next chart, DLA Disposition Services, also serving a fairly unique role at DLA. So that's the command that manages kind of the opposite end of the supply chain. All that material that comes back from Iraq, Afghanistan, DLA Disposition Services disposes of excess property received from the military services, which includes both usable items and scrap. So where it's feasible, property is first offered for utilization within the department, transferred to other federal agencies, or donated to state and local governments. So for example, schools can acquire excess computers and other IT technology. Law enforcement and fire departments can receive vehicles or other equipment. Certain excess items are sold to the public after eligible recipients have passed on them. So Disposition Services purchases supplies and services to support their mission, including for small business, most significantly hazardous waste disposal contracts. So Disposition Services, distribution, and then DLA Contracting Services Office, or DCSO, are the three. I tend to think we're in Virginia. I know you have folks from across the country, but yes, Virginia, Washington, DC area tend to be services types of vendors. Hopefully we have some manufacturers, dealers, distributors on as well. But when you're talking about services contracts, again, a fairly small portion of DLA work, but it's DLA distribution, disposition services, and more significantly, the DLA contracting services office. So as you can imagine, DLA has, I might have been on our earlier chart, but DLA has about 25,000 employees, with worldwide operations and facilities. So every big organization like that needs certain services to kind of maintain itself. So all the other commands that I just spoke about are essentially buying things not for DLA's use, but for use by Army, Navy, Air Force, and other agencies. So DCSO is the buying command at DLA that kind of keeps us running, right? We need IT, facilities, services. We need certain consultants and other professional services. So DCSO, you probably heard of, or some folks have heard of JETS, J6 Enterprise Technology Services contract vehicle. It's an IT multiple award contract. And I believe, and I shouldn't say, I think that opportunity has either just closed or is about to close. If you're an IT vendor, you probably should look up JETS. And I wish I knew what the closing date on that solicitation was, but it's either, like I said, just happened or about to happen, where that solicitation is going to close. But yeah, we spend about $1.5 billion every year through DCSO writing services contracts. So that's DCSO. And I think that's all I have on the various buying commands at DLI. Alice, back
Thank
to you.
you, Chris. That was a great rundown. If you can see that they buy so much stuff, I didn't know how large y'all were. You're bigger than I thought. But a lot of services and supplies. I misspoke earlier about IT. They even do IT. So prepare yourself. If you fall in one of these categories and you think you have a product or service that you can supply to DLA, you want to be able to reach out. So prepare yourself. Here it is, all laid out for you. We'll have these charts available for you later. One more question, Chris. Do you have any other advice for getting started with DLA? Can you tell us more about the DLA Small Business Office and how prospective suppliers can reach out to you?
Yeah, sure thing, Alice. So, and of course, we talked about the socioeconomic programs earlier, and that gets complicated, right? The rules, the FAR, the DFARs,
Yes.
DLA has its own supplement, and all the other DoD components have supplements, so that there's big, thick rule books that you have to be familiar with to pursue contracts with DLA or other federal agencies. So the DLA Office of Small Business Programs is one of those resources. Another one, you might have heard of the Procurement Technical Assistance Program, or sometimes referred to as PTAP or PTAC. To make it a bit more complicated, we recently changed the name to Apex Accelerators. So in any case, formerly PTAP, PTAC, now Apex Accelerators, it's all the same program. So the Apex Accelerators, formerly referred to as the PTACs or Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, were created to expand the number of businesses capable of participating in government contracts. And it's not just DLA contracts, but under the program, the Apex Accelerators help businesses pursue and perform under contracts with the Department of Defense, other federal agencies, state and local governments, and even as subcontractors. So Apex Accelerators support prospective government contractors by helping you register in government procurement systems, research contracting opportunities, and understand the best practices preparing and submitting bids for government work. So as a program, as a DoD program that was created by Congress, most of the assistance the accelerators provide for vendors, for businesses, for suppliers is at no charge. The first step to working with DLA or the government in general, the program is a good place to start. And there's an Apex Accelerator in almost every state. So for example, Northern Virginia, where I am, the George Mason University in Fairfax is the Northern Virginia PTAC, and there's other PTACs, University of Maryland, the district government in Washington, D.C. There's probably a PTAC in your area. So wherever you're joining us from, if you use the DoD website, the website that DoD created for the Apex Accelerator program, you can find your local Apex Accelerator. So probably the easiest way to do that is Google, right? APEX, Apex Accelerators. Look for that, look for the DoD website, and you can find the one closest to you. Another great resource already mentioned, the DLA Small Business Office and the DLA website. So you see that URL at the top of the slide. So visit our website for more about DLA, and I welcome you reaching out to our folks, our small business folks at DLA to continue that discussion. On the website, you'll find contact information for small business offices throughout DLA, which we've located alongside every major buying command. So for specifics about a particular contract or a particular opportunity, I really have to defer to our folks in the field. We have small business office representatives sitting together with DLA's contracting and requirements folks that can help you through the process. And we want to get to the next slide, Alice. There you go. So you'll see on this chart that engagement with the small business community is a priority for DLA, and especially for the DLA Small Business Office. Check the calendar. Again, the URL there on the bottom of the screen, or you can find it from the small business website. Check the calendar, register for one or more of the webinars that we hold at least monthly. So for example, next week for the Service Disabled Veteran Owned Small Business Program, if you're a Service Disabled Veteran Owned Small Business Program, if you're a Service Disabled Veteran Owned Small Business, hopefully you know that program is undergoing some significant changes, going from self-certification to an SBA certification. So we'll talk about that and other opportunities for SDVOSBs at that webinar next week, the 14th. I think that's Wednesday or Thursday. That'll be Wednesday, I think, next week. But anyway, look it up, look up our website, register for an event. We do this at least monthly. They're all free. And for example, the next week webinar on SDVOSB program, you're welcome to attend. It's open to the small business community. It's open to the public in general, regardless of whether you're at SDVOSB or you're not. And I think that's all I got on this one, Alice.
Thank you so much, Chris. That's a lot of information. We really appreciate that overview. What he said earlier, and I just want to re-emphasize this, I'm going to say that the small business office is your entry level into the agency here at DLA. They have, as he said, there are sub-commands under him. They have small business professionals at each one of those commands. So if you want to talk about something that's specific to a specific contract or something you're working on or sources sought, you may want to start with the headquarters, but eventually he'll get you down to the people you may want to know. So often we see companies want to go directly to the contracting officer or the program manager. And Chris said something that was very unique that I want you to grasp. What he said is his small business professionals all in the field sit and work very closely with the contracting people and very closely with the program manager. Small business people are your advocate. Those are the entry level. Those are the people you should be reaching out first. And you want to come prepared, and preparation that comes with making sure you're understanding the mission, you know how to sell yourself, bringing solutions, understand what some of the issues are there so you can create solutions for those issues. Now, Chris, this is the time we want to be able to take questions for from our audience. So I'm going to bring Claudia on, and Claudia is going to see if we have any questions out there from the audience.
Sure.
Yes,
Claudia?
we have some questions. Can you please elaborate on the R&D small business innovation research? What does DLA require also provide for this topic?
Right. So the most interesting to me, and again, I kind of have to refer you to the SBIR folks at DLA for maybe a more complete answer, but one of the creative ways DLA uses the SBIR program, right? So I mentioned we buy literally millions of parts, right? We buy parts for aircraft that are, 30, 40 years old. So we have a problem with obsolete parts, right? At DLA, either the prime contractor, the OEM doesn't want to make anymore, can't make anymore, or maybe they're charging us an arm and a leg for a part that we think we should probably be paying much less for. So one of the ways we use SBIR at DLA is to have small businesses come in and do reverse engineering on a part that we don't have a source for, or we require a second source for, and then you become our supplier for that part, for future requirements. So the SBIR phase 1, phase 2 part of the program would be you taking that part and doing the reverse engineering and, basically learning how to make the part that we don't have tech data on perhaps. And then the phase 3 part of SBIR, you becoming our supplier for future requirements for that same part. So that's the SBIR program that I'm most familiar with at DLA. Certainly there are others and other R&D initiatives, and I shouldn't I shouldn't try to guess at what they are because it's been a while since I refreshed my knowledge of what that was. But we did stuff with like what's the I can't think of the name of the house, but sorry.
It's okay.
Additive manufacturing. We had some R&D on additive manufacturing, some R&D on batteries. Batteries is a big deal and hard to source sometimes. So we did some R&D on batteries. So those are just a couple examples. I couldn't even promise you that those are the current things we're pursuing via SBI or R&D, but certainly that's a question you should take to our folks if that doesn't.
And you can find their information on your website. You have a SBIR section on your website?
Sure, we do. And let me give the group my email. I don't know if that's in your material or not, but Christopher, I guess spelled the regular way, CHRISTOPHER, Christopher.Hall, HALL, Christopher.Hall@DLA.mil. So you can always start with me if you can't find it on the website as well.
Thank you so much. Claudia, do we have another question?
Yes, someone is having problems with completing the DoD/DLA and DIBS registration. During the process of the registration process, they require a code that is sent via USPS that never arrives.
Yeah, so that's an issue that I'm aware of, and the fact that it never arrives for a particular vendor certainly is a problem, right? So that's one of the things we do. It's kind of like the cage code process, where one of the things we do to validate that you're a real business with a real address there's a postcard mailing process that we send you something in the mail, and you have to and it's not my area of expertise, but I know that's part of the process, right? So if that happens, we have a DIBS validate. I don't know. I don't see the question, but reach out to me on that too, because we can always try to track that down. I mean, that does happen. As you can imagine, we're dealing with thousands of vendors, but DIBS, DLA, let me talk a little bit about DIBS since you've opportunity. So reach out to me on the postcard thing. There's hiccups in the process where things don't get mailed out right. I know that happens, but DIBS, generally speaking, the question was about DIBS, the DLA Internet Bid Board System. So this is bid board system. So this is a system that DLA uses where vendors would have an account, and we sort of like SAM.gov. We put requirements on DIBS for bids. It's thousands of contracts, hundreds of awards every day, lots of set asides, lots of automated one-time buys or automated delivery orders. A lot of times under the simplified acquisition threshold. So that's what DIBS is, the DLA Internet Bid Board System. Yeah, and it's not the easiest process in the world to establish and maintain an account. Folks I know get locked out for breaking a rule that they maybe didn't know was a rule or didn't know they broke. So yeah, that's a fairly cumbersome. But as you can imagine, we have a whole group that's like the fraud detection and prevention. Folks at DLA. So not everybody. I'm sure the vendor that asked the question is probably a good guy, but not everybody is. So there's a lot of vetting that goes on, and it's not always seamless or fast. But yeah, you can reach out to me or reach out to one of the small business folks on our website to try to help you get a better answer if you're not getting a response from our DIBS people.
Now, Chris, do you have to be registered in DIBS to do business with you all?
You don't. I mean, a lot of our requirements go through DIBS, but a lot of requirements also, especially like the IT stuff or the services stuff, DIBS is for parts.
Okay, got it.
DLA Energy doesn't use DIBS. DLA Contracting Services Office doesn't use DIBS. So it's a kind of a subset, primarily parts.
Right.
But even then, not everything does. Certainly, if you're a supplier of parts, so those types of supplies, you should get yourself set up on DIBS, but there's also lots of opportunities outside of DIBS as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Claudia, is there another question?
Yes, so when an opportunity for a product is available through the RFP process, is the small business required to submit a formal response to the RFP, or is there a BPA or work order in lieu of an RFP response, which can be costly for a small business?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I completely understand the question, but you got to follow the particulars of the situation. Certainly, if it's RFP request for a proposal, usually it's going to require a proposal be submitted, right? And then maybe if it's a requirements type contract or a long-term contract, an indefinite delivery contract, perhaps future orders most of the, I mentioned we award 10,000 contracts a day. Most of that is orders, delivery orders, task orders under indefinite delivery contracts, like, including BOAs and BPAs. So, I mean, I guess it's hard to answer that question generally, but usually if it's RFP, it's going to require a proposal, but not necessarily every task order or delivery order subsequent to that would depending on the contract type. But even then, we have multiple award contracts. Or single award contracts. We compete orders sometimes we don't. So it really depends.
Right.
Sure.
Is it safe to say if it's a RFP out and you're going to utilize an instrument such as the blanket purchase agreement, it will be specified in the RFP? Is that correct?
Sure thing. Yeah, all the instructions should be in there.
So I think that's what they were trying to get at. I'm with you. I'm not really sure, but yes, if it's an RFP and they're going to use a blanket purchase agreement, it would spell that out in the RFP. So you should respond to the RFP as is written.
Right. And Apex Accelerators, again, a plug for them. That's a good resource. I mean, the department spends tens of millions of dollars funding the Apex Accelerators to answer questions exactly like that one and help vendors interpret solicitations and things like that. So that's a great resource if you're not using them.
Great. Any other questions, Claudia?
Can you give some idea about IT vendor management services?
IT vendor management services. Not sure what that means necessarily. I mean, DLA has information systems. If that's a question about the kinds of requirements we have, or I'm not really sure how to answer that. I'm not really an IT person, but certainly on our website, again, you can find contact information, or you can get it from me, the DLA Contracting Services Office. Those are the folks that know, the ins and outs, the DLA IT requirements and what we're buying. It's probably a better question for them. I mean, as you can imagine, we're a huge organization, spread out across the globe with information systems like DIBS, like our financial management systems, like the ordering systems that we have when the military services require a part, they place an order with DLA, and that's it. So it's information system support like that. It's probably, as a layman in the IT world, the kinds of IT requirements we have, but I'm sure they can give you a better answer at DCSO.
Thank you. Any other questions, Claudia?
We have a question on micro contracts. Does DLA food substance have micro contracts? Most solicitations require the bidder to develop a full line of fruits and vegetables. Most small businesses cannot do this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of contracts in the subsistence, the food contracts are one of those. Again, you kind of talk to troop support to get all the details, but right, a lot of our contracts are like that, right? Where it's not necessarily an opportunity for a prime contract. Sometimes these contracts are massive, providing food, for example, to a whole region of the world, right? And it could be almost anything under the sun. And some of the other contracts that troop support has, like the Special Operational Equipment Program, right? It's a lot of what troop support does, and a lot of what DLA does generally. Some of these contracts are massive contracts. So I mean, subcontracts, right? I mean, a lot of times if you're a subsistence and you have a niche, making something up, you're a dessert, you do desserts, right? We're probably not buying those like a cake at a time, right? There's a big contract and we're placing orders, but we do have requirements for everything you can imagine soldiers eat, on any base across the country, and that all has to come from somewhere. So a lot of that's going to be opportunities for subcontracts, and certainly our folks at troop support, in the case of subsistence or our other commands, can help you figure out which, who are the prime contractors, and what's the best way to pursue those kind of opportunities. So yeah, not everything is one at a time type stuff. We do that a lot. DIBS is a lot of that, one time buy type stuff. But the vast majority of DLA contracts, something like 90%, are delivery orders under bigger indefinite delivery contracts. And so yeah, there's certainly tons of opportunities for subcontractors, and maybe that's one of them. But again, you got to talk to our folks at troop support to get a better answer than that.
Yeah, that was a very good question. And you brought out subcontracting. Yes, where you can't play in prime, you definitely want to start building relationship with some of the prime contractors who have some of these larger contracts. Because, every prime contractor for an open competition contract has to have subcontracting goals, which they're required, DLA is required to monitor as well, ensure that they meet those goals as well. So where you can't play as a prime and full and open, or they don't have set asides for those, then really look at subcontracting. It's a lot of work in the subcontracting area.
Sure thing. Yeah, and the government or the DoD goal, just to add to that, the DoD goal for prime contracts is something like 23%, 22%.
Yes.
And
yes.
the DoD goal for subcontracts is something like 33%. So there's as many opportunities out there for subcontracts as there are for prime contracts, for sure.
Thank you. Claudia, any other questions?
Does DLA have an IT service or IT commodities internal BPA or government-wide purchasing contract that it utilizes for its procurements that vendor suppliers should be aware of?
So off the top of my head, I mean, the JETS contract, and I don't know that we use it like that anymore. The JETS contract, J6 Enterprise Technology Support Contract, is a DLA multiple award contract. And we used to have it set up so other agencies can use it. I don't know if that was the question. But yeah, we use like NASA SOUP. And I think that's primarily for like hardware, IT hardware. So we use that. Our DCSO folks use, generally speaking, use GSA contracts. So certainly we're buying off GSA, and that makes me think of a kind of another point, right? There's DLA is kind of like the GSA of the DoD, right? So I mean, GSA has their lane. They do stuff like professional services, facilities related services, IT, and then DLA has our niche. So yeah, certainly we buy off. NASA SOUP is the one that comes to mind off the top of my head. GSA Oasis is another one, I think, that our folks use. So certainly we use those government-wide acquisition contracts at GSA for some of our requirements, especially at a DCSO. So hopefully that gets a little bit at that question.
Okay, thanks. We may have time for a few more questions. Any more questions, Claudia?
Does DLA use Ability One suppliers?
Certainly. So Ability One, and that's kind of a unique question. So you have DLA and you have small business program and the Ability One program. So it gets a little bit complicated, right? Because Ability One isn't small business, right? It's actually an exclusion when you talk about small business goals. So it's kind of complicated like that, and it's not really operated out of the DLA Small Business Office. That's not to say I know a little bit about it, especially troop support. A lot of the uniform stuff we buy is Ability One. So certainly, I wish I could give you the numbers, but hundreds of millions of dollars. Certainly DLA does with Ability One every year. And I know most of that's out of troop support. Clothing and textiles especially comes to mind. But generally speaking, if you're an Ability One, if you participate in the Ability One program, or you're a vendor under Ability One, right? Not really my lane as a small business person, but DLA certainly does a ton Ability One as well. And again, most of that's troop support stuff, and most of that, I believe, is clothing and textiles. But yeah, it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Okay, we have time for another question.
From our conversation earlier on the hub zone goals, what is the percentage goal for hub zone for DLA?
So 3%. So that's, yeah. So for the socioeconomic programs, except for SDB, DLA is tracking the government-wide goals. So it's 5% women-owned, 3% hub zone, 3% service disabled veteran and small business. So yeah, 3% is the hub zone goal for DLA.
And again, congratulations on meeting that goal. One more question, Claudia, before we end.
That's all the questions I have.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Chris, do you have any additional comments that you would like to leave with the group before we depart?
Nope. I think I'm out of material, but no, thanks again for inviting us. Appreciate the opportunity. Sorry, Tommy couldn't make it, but Alice, thanks for stepping in and doing a good job.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. On behalf of MBDA, Mr. Marks, who's the director here at the center, we really appreciate you participating with us today. We hope that you got all the information you need to understand how to do business with DLA. We're very happy to have had Chris. He gave us a wealth of knowledge. The slides will be posted at the end or on our website at some point this week. This is actually our last webinar for the fiscal year. We'll begin again sometime in September. So Chris, you were our last guest, and we really appreciate you participating with us. Again, to Dwight, congratulations to him growing his family. I'm sorry we couldn't have him, but we were very delighted to have you. So thanks again. Again, on behalf of Mr. Marks and Ms. Sharon Pender, who is the president of MBDA, we're very happy to have had this. We're looking forward to a new season coming up where we'll have multiple webinars coming up. Appreciate the staff for participating as well, and all of you all out there. Thank you again. Chris, thanks again for coming. We appreciate you. You all take care.
Thanks, Alice.